Good afternoon. My name is Mark Emery. Welcome to our panel on innovations in cybersecurity. Today, we're going to focus on government's need for innovation to reduce its cybersecurity risk. COVID-19 has changed the attack surface overnight for many cyber threats, and government agencies have responded with the same lightning speed as their more often nimble counterparts in the private sector. After half a year in this new normal, our panelists will discuss where they see opportunities for innovation that will strengthen cyber defenses and fill gaps recently exposed. I'm excited to have with me today 5 leaders in cybersecurity from government, academia, and industry who will provide their unique perspectives on the innovations we need in cybersecurity. Dr. Diana Burley, Vice Provost for Research at American University, Alex Atumalil, Deputy CISO for Under Armour, Bo Hauser, CISO at the U.S. Census Bureau, Saeed Abu-Nema, CEO of Seclytics, and Mary Ellen Seal, founder of the National Cybersecurity Society, are with us on the panel today. Each of them will provide a brief talk to stimulate our discussion. Then we'll have a question and answer period to ask questions of our panelists. Please use your Q&A window to ask your question at any time during the presentations. Let's start with Bo Hauser. Bo serves as the Chief Information Security Officer for the U.S. Census Bureau, where he manages cybersecurity for the agency and is currently addressing the challenge of safeguarding the technological platforms behind the 2020 population count. Prior to joining the census, Mr. Hauser served as the CISO for the Small Business Administration and Deputy CISO at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, and fulfilled the role of Executive Director for Marketplace Security, which included cybersecurity responsibilities for healthcare.gov. Bo, the 2020 census looks to be complete from the public's point of view. You can relax now, right?
Not quite. I mean, the hard part is over for sure. We've completed the collection operation. It went really well for us. We're really excited about how that phase of the operation went, in spite of all the challenges we faced over the summer. But yeah, we still got a little bit of work to do. So we're not taking our eyes off the ball yet until we get this fully completed. And thanks for that intro. I thought I would just spend a minute or two talking a little bit about how CISOs view cybersecurity today, and from a conceptual standpoint, and it might help inform our conversation during this session. So there's really 2 models that we consider. The first is what we know as defense in depth, right? And that's a pretty simple concept. We try to, build the walls as strong and as high as we can based on the resources that we have. And I won't spend much time on that because I think it's pretty straightforward. We try to do all the blocking and tackling. But the other concept that we pair with that defense in depth is called a threat-based model. And this is, I think, what differentiates cybersecurity from what we used to call information assurance, right? Information assurance really centralizes around defense in depth. Cybersecurity infuses intelligence into the processes in order to, employ that threat-based model, right? We want to know who our adversaries are that we care most about, what they're doing, why they're doing it, what their motivations are, and then more importantly, how they're doing it, right? And you heard a lot during the elections about Russia and China and Iran from an influence standpoint. And so that's an example of how we want to really make sure that we maintain our situation awareness of those specific actors that target our sectors, and then use that information to do things like inform our defenses, obviously, but also inform our penetration testing so we can simulate those attacks against our systems that we know that are happening out there, to make sure that our systems are resilient, and to also make sure that our monitoring and our protections are adequate as well. So that cyber threat intelligence is a huge enabler to modern cybersecurity programs. It also, we've heard the term threat hunting, right? When you're hunting for someone. And so that intelligence informs your hunting capabilities, which happens on the internal network, to identify any telltale signs that someone's been there in an unauthorized, unauthorized parties have been inside your environment. So, and then another one is training and awareness, right? If we know that there's an emerging phishing attack, we can get that into our training and awareness program, send out some phishing exercises to really make sure that our staff are looking at things, looking at those emerging threats and better equip them to recognize it. So I just wanted to mention those two conceptual models that, I think most of us today employ as we, deal with protecting cloud and implementing all these new approaches that I'm sure we'll talk more about during this session.
Thank you, Bo. Next up, Alex Atumalil. He's a cross-functional leader focused on delivering results through teamwork, financial responsibility, problem solving, and adaptability. He brings global interpersonal cultural experiences and technology to initiate and implement large projects. He's responsible for driving proactive security mitigations through risk-centric global policies and advanced customized technologies. As the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer at Under Armour, Alex is responsible for strategic planning, financial responsibility, and operational continuity. Alex has over 20 years of experience with building, developing, and maintaining versatile cybersecurity teams. Alex, what insights from a private enterprise could help others in the government innovate in cybersecurity?
Mark, thank you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to join you guys. Such an awesome panel to be part of. So let me, I grew up in the defense contracting world majority of my career, and I transitioned over to the private industry about 6-7 years ago. Right, that's when I moved over. Cloud transformation and working remote. Those are the two topics that I want to quickly kind of address, because that is front and center for Under Armour these days, right? Because of all the things that are happening around us. So we've really seen a massive expansion into the cloud environment, right? So Google, AWS, Azure, all of these guys all betting the barn on cloud being the future, right? And we have also seen some of that stuff kind of moving across into the .gov and the .ic world with C2E and DoD JEDI awards, et cetera, right? So cloud expansion and cloud transformation from a data center environment is really giving us a SaaS-based cloud application consumption and storing our data in the cloud, right? So moving it away from our data center where we could touch and feel the stuff, away from our controls and moving into somebody else's environment, right? The catch to this is business really loves it, right? So they see a lot of value in doing this, right? A lot less upfront capital, right? You get the resiliency, you get the backup, offload all of that data into the cloud, right? So not a lot of upfront cost when you're moving into a different country. So if you think about Under Armour, as fast as we move into different countries at all times. If we keep investing, hard dollars into that space, it's cost prohibitive for all of the places that we want to move into. So cloud is becoming a tool of the trade, and we adapt and increase and decrease the workloads that we used to or we need based on our business growth. Right? If we are growing massively, we'll just expand, and if we need to shrink down a little bit because of COVID, et cetera, we can shrink down without really losing that investment, right? And then COVID hit, right, for us. We are a big mobile workforce. Everybody went home. We are no longer in the offices. How do you adjust and adapt to that environment, right? The value prop that cloud provides us is, well, you can be anywhere now, right? You don't really have to be in your offices. And we adjusted rather quickly to that whole space, right? We invested in tech very quickly. We adapted remote working, et cetera, et cetera. And we changed the game very quickly. Now, it's a financial game changer for the businesses also, right? People are thinking, well, you don't need to be in offices anymore. Well, you can always work from home. Do we need the offices? Can we get some cost savings there? right? These are two different technologies, right? The whole cloud transformation and working from home, but they complement each other, right? That was the whole idea behind moving this. Now, why do I care? Why a security practitioner really cares about that scenario, right? Because now your workforce is highly mobile. You are no longer putting perimeter defenses to kind of control the stuff. You have to move your defenses to the endpoints. Your data loss prevention strategy now has to incorporate people's homes, right? Their beach environment, or their beach houses, or the local Starbucks, etc. These are where they will be working from going forward, right? As a security practitioner at Under Armour, my job is to make sure that I fully support the cloud adoption strategy, right? The business sees that as a value prop. They definitely see that as a financial enabler. I need to understand what that shared security model really means, and we start enabling the business, looking at technologies like zero trust, SD-WAN, and moving detection and mitigation to the endpoint, right? We no longer can say network is going to protect me. I need to move it to the endpoint. And I need to diversify myself from signature-based detection to behavior-based detection, right? Accounts can get compromised, and there is a lot more chance of accounts getting compromised when you're working from home, right? And deploying some of the capabilities that we need to mitigate some of those threats. It's a journey, right? And we believe it's only going to get accelerated. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Terrific. Insightful. I got a huge challenge there. So Mary Ellen Seal, our next panelist, is the CEO and founder of the National Cybersecurity Society, a national nonprofit organization focused on cybersecurity education, awareness, and advocacy for small businesses. She retired after 30 years of federal service, with the majority of her tenure as a member of the Senior Executive Service. In her last federal position, she was Deputy Director, Cybersecurity Coordination at the Department of Homeland Security. So Mary Ellen, you've straddled the worlds of government and the private sector. How are these two playing together in cybersecurity innovation?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you, Mark. And thank you so much for TiGov for inviting me to participate today and talk to you a little bit about the challenges that the small business community is facing in cybersecurity. We saw the challenges at DHS that the focus had been on critical infrastructure sectors, and there was very little really in the early days focused on protecting small businesses. So one of the things that we started to look at is what means and methods need to be in place for small businesses to really get a hold and put together a framework and implement cybersecurity best practices for their organization. And so we formed this nonprofit, and what we've seen is that many small businesses don't have the resources to be able to put together a cybersecurity framework or implement a cybersecurity framework, much less being able to understand how to implement secure tools. Add to that the complexity with COVID-19, and we are seeing a 200% increase in the cyber attacks to this community. So while they're trying to stay afloat, when they're trying to reach their customers, they have their employees that are deployed like all over the place, at their beach homes, at Starbucks, hopefully not. But many of these businesses haven't put in place the practices to protect themselves. So today, one of the innovations I want to really talk about is the Ohio Data Protection Act. One of the things that we found is that, as I mentioned, this number of small businesses really haven't gotten security. They think security is through, I'm just too small for anyone to find me. It's kind of the security by obscurity. And given the numbers in terms of how many small businesses are in the US, the majority of them are less than 20 employees. So those companies, there are like 5.9 million small businesses in the US with employees, of which almost 85% of those have less than 20 employees. They don't have a CISO. They don't have a guy or a gal that's an IT security expert. So they're really challenged in terms of implementing cybersecurity practices. And there's really nothing out there other than PCI DSS compliance, or maybe HIPAA if they're a business associate, that's forcing them to get cybersecurity. So as a company, we're trying to educate the companies on cybersecurity, yet they've got too many other things to deal with, so they're not dealing with it. And one of the things that we found recently, actually this law passed in 2018, is the Ohio Data Protection Act. And what they have done is they're trying to incentivize small businesses to build a cybersecurity program, hopefully based upon one of the frameworks. And in the event that they get hacked and they have a data breach, then they are protected from the regulators. And we've seen a number of companies that have been attacked, and then they further compromised by having a penalty enforced on them, either through a government agency or a state attorney general. So as we're looking forward, one of the things that we would really like to see come together is a federal Data Protection Act across the board. So many companies contact us and need help on a data breach activity. And there's different data breach laws in 50 different states. So it's really difficult to try to come up with a good advice in terms of what they need to do in terms of a data breach. But the Ohio Data Protection Act is what we see as a real innovation in this space, because we need to get to a place where we're not penalizing small businesses. You know, for a small business to be able to thwart a nation state, it's almost impossible for them to be able to do that. And we need to put together policies and practices in place to enable these businesses to put together a program, and in the event that they have a breach, be able to share that information effectively with the greater community. So we're an ISAO, which is an information sharing analysis organization similar to ISAC. So we're developed in the early days of cybersecurity. And what as an ISAO, if an organization, a small business becomes a member of an ISAO or ISAC, and in the event that they report the incident, either through those channels or to the government, under the Information Sharing Act of 2015, that's a federal law, they are protected from litigation and liability. So we really encourage businesses to come on board, join our organization, or join another information sharing analysis organization so that they can get the protections in place that is free to them. And in the event they are attacked, then we or another ISAO can intervene on their behalf to help them either shore up their defenses as well as report the incident to the government so that the broader community can protect themselves effectively. So that's about it that I have to share today, but happy to take your questions about this innovation.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. That's a really big idea to get to some of these incentives on a federal level for the small businesses. Turning now to Saeed Abunimah. He's one of the leading thinkers on the intersection between machine learning and cybersecurity. Prior to founding Seclytics, he held the position of distinguished scientist at PayPal. Before that, he was senior scientist at Damballa and a security researcher at WebSense. He holds a PhD from Southern Methodist University and a postdoc from Carnegie Mellon. Saeed has authored more than 19 papers and books on the applications of machine learning to cybersecurity. Saeed, please tell us your story. How did you come to innovate in the cyberspace with artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Thank you for having me here, Mark. I really appreciate it, and nice to meet you, ladies and gentlemen on the panel. I come personally from a security research background, so spent most of our time in academia and the industry trying to understand how cyber criminals behave and how cyber criminals move. Based on that experience, we decided to build Seclytics in 2014 to come up with an idea to be one step ahead of cyber criminals, because we think we understand how cyber criminals move and how they act. We can see certain patterns daily on how these guys build criminal infrastructure online, how they acquire it, where they set up servers to attack enterprise customers or government agencies or end users. So the basic idea behind what we built was to take advantage of all of this and build a system that learns how cyber criminals behave and how they move and where they set up their infrastructure to be one step ahead of them, so we can tell organizations, be careful. A criminal infrastructure was set up today. If we do certain correlations between our knowledge and these profiles with the customer's traffic or logs, we can tell them you will be attacked by this cyber criminal group in the next week or two. And we built systems that are, excuse me, extremely accurate when it comes to predicting these types of behaviors. So when it comes to looking at what happens in the industry today, most of the solutions that exist are reactive. We are waiting to receive a malware sample or detect a certain attack attempt. So as Alex mentioned, the majority of solutions are signature-based detection. There are certain new companies that have come to existence in the last couple of years that are using machine learning and leveraging artificial intelligence, but still no one is trying to be one step ahead of cyber criminals by understanding where they deploy their infrastructure, how they do it. If you think about most of the products in the security space these days, they all require patient zero. And that's one of the main problems that we are facing today, is that can we do anything to protect myself without requiring that patient zero? And that's the whole idea behind what we built and where we saw the real innovation needed. So
and the translation from, you know, the studying about it in academia to the actual having a startup, is that a big leap, say?
of course, yes. So most of the things we built here has a theoretical foundation. We published papers about the models that we built. So the initial research we did either during my PhD studies or postdoc studies was very pivotal in setting the foundation of building this technology. And of course, you need lots of experience to add to it, which comes from the industry as well, on how cyber criminals move and how they act. Yes.
Great, thank you, Saeed.
Thank you.
Our last panelist is Dr. Diana Burley. She's the Vice Provost for Research at American University, where she's also the Professor of Public Administration and Policy and Professor of IT and Analytics. Dr. Burley is a cybersecurity expert who regularly conducts cybersecurity training for executives across North America, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East on managing cybersecurity risk, assessing the threat environment, and strengthening organizational cybersecurity posture. She has testified before Congress, is a member of the U.S. National Academy's Board on Human Systems Integration, and an affiliated researcher with the Cyber Operations Group of the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory. Prior to American University, Dr. Burley was a professor at George Washington University, where she directed the Institute for Information Infrastructure Protection, a 26-member national consortium dedicated to strengthening the cyber infrastructure of the United States. Dr. Burley has received a number of honors during her career. The most recent was to be named one of SC Magazine and the SC Magazine Reboot Awardee for Educational Leadership in IT Security. Diana, what role does education and academia play in cybersecurity innovation?
Well, thank you, Mark. And I want to really paint a broad picture, because when I think about the role that education or academia plays, I like to think about it from the perspective of a thought experiment. And I often start off, my talks with positioning a question for the audience to think through. And that is, as we think about innovation in cybersecurity, we tend to iterate, right? Innovation is all about iterative movement forward. But what happens when the basic premise, the basic principles and the parameters upon which we were iterating are different? They change, they're taken out from under us. And so when we think about what happened to us in March of this year, March 16th, 17th, 18th, whatever day your company moved to remote work, many of the basic premises that we had about how we would secure our enterprise went away. because as we look at the way that we build our cybersecurity infrastructure, they are primarily based on the realities or the idea that we can put a line around our employees, that we have an infrastructure, we have a workplace, and that went away. And not just are people working from home, I tend to not even say from home, I tend to say remote, because we don't know where they're working, right? Yes, it could be their beach house. Yes, it could be Starbucks. But even that focuses on those employees who have means, because we have a lot of employees who have lesser means that are working in places where they really are not in control of the privacy. They're not in control of the network infrastructure that they will be connecting to our systems from. And more importantly than even that, we're faced with the reality that we can no longer think about the technology and the behavior in two separate, isolated ways. We have to recognize that the behavioral realities, the social situations of our employees play a tremendous role in their ability to think about the security precautions that they need to take, or the practices that they engage in. And so when I think about those basic premises, those basic parameters that we held true before March 16th, 17th, or 18th, when we all moved away somewhere, I think we have to take that step back and think through, how are we really working through the idea of connecting the technical and the behavioral issues that our employees face when they are engaging in their work activities. When people are worried about food insecurity, when they're worried about home, when they're worried about teaching their children, when they're worried about their basic health, it is very difficult to be mindful of the other things. And the other things are often the security protections and protocols and practices that we put into place. And so I really want to focus the audience's attention on that link between technology and behavior, and especially thinking through, when we develop our cybersecurity awareness programs, when we develop our policies and procedures, we are developing them with the mindset that everyone's life is fairly similar, fairly within some standard parameters. But what happens when they're not? And what impact does that have on our ability to secure our enterprises? And what impact does that have on our ability to help our employees understand their role in securing our enterprises? Even as we ended Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and the focus was on doing your part, knowing what part you can play. Again, what happens when people are so worried about their other basic fundamental needs that they can't even conceive of what their part ought to be in securing the network or the data of the enterprise? And so I just would like to leave our audience with that as a thought experiment. And as the academic, I think it's my job to say, let's blow up the place, and let's think about this from a whole new perspective and turn it upside down and think about, how would we approach securing our enterprises if all of the basic things that we thought were true no longer held true? So I'll leave you with that.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Burley. That really, I think, ties a bow on a lot of what everybody's been talking about, and really appreciate that. I want to remind the audience, you can go into the question box on your browser and submit a question for any or all of our panelists. While people are doing that, I have a few. To Bo and Alex, question for you guys. In what cybersecurity innovations are you currently investing?
So I'll start out, and then we'll kick it over to Alex. What I'm seeing is, again, in line with a lot of folks' comments, there is a continuous push to the cloud, which also triggers a lot of these other innovative concepts that have been in the conversation lately, right? And you think about things like a data-centric approach to cybersecurity, knowing where your crown jewels are and protecting those above all else, right? Makes a lot of sense. And it also, that concept marries up with a zero trust architecture. And we've talked about the remote work today quite a bit, and how we really don't have control over the environment like we did. And so zero trust really gives us the tools that we need to more granularly identify the elements of trust that we want to prioritize and focus on those for building the trust of that individual or entity in order to allow that access, right? And if you don't build that trust through, the endpoint characteristics, the network characteristics, and the identity characteristics, then you don't allow that connection. But within that, there's a lot of flexibility, and industry's leading the way here too, right? We see with our banks and other websites, if you get a new phone or a new device, you get extra prompts about, is this you? Additional rigor is applied, and it's very flexible to the user, but very rigorous on the back end. So data-centric, zero trust. The other one that comes to mind is DevSecOps. DevSecOps is in the conversation a lot, and some folks think that is integrating capabilities, development, security, and ops. I view it more as unifying those capabilities, right? You really want to move all those requirements left as far as you can into that development lifecycle, so that instead of security professionals interrogating and chasing after everything that comes out of that CI/CD pipeline, we know that the software releases are secure because we've done that work within the pipeline, right? So it really simplifies cybersecurity, if done in a mature way. But there's obviously a lot of challenges and details to get there. So Alex, I'll turn it over to you.
Right. So 100% in agreement with what Bo was kind of mentioning. I mean, those are all kind of the approaches that we at Under Armour is kind of taking as well. The one piece that is going to enable this is, how do we make the move from a data center model into a cloud enhanced model, right? So moving what we have in the data center and having it available in the cloud as an infrastructure, or consume that software or service from the cloud, right? At the end of the day, that's what you need to do to kind of put all the security and stuff around it, right? So we need to enable that migration. So you are not standing or straddling two bridges, right? You're moving away from the data center, and you're moving and migrating all your data and your services into the cloud. So your security measures can be focused on one area and not spread across all over the place, right? So that's an area that would kind of enable this, the topic that Bo kind of mentioned, right?
Okay, thank you both. Thank you, Alex. And just to reflect on the challenge Dr. Burley put up there, it's a kind of companion question to where your agency or your company is spending your money. Has this rapid change to remote work changed where you're investing your cybersecurity dollars?
Alex, you want to take that one first?
Right. Yeah, I can. So, knock on wood. I mean, we can't claim ownership. That we were foreseeing this. COVID's going to happen. We were ready to enact it, but we were kind of on a glide path towards working remote, right? Under Armour had kind of made sure that we were going to be a remote force, because we are a global organization and we travel quite a bit. And there's definitely an opportunity for you to work from anywhere, really. So that was something that the business required, and the security team needed to enable it, and the IT team needed to enable it. So we were on a glide path towards it, right? We think the cloud adoption that is being accelerated, or it is about to accelerate, it comes with its own security risk, right? As I mentioned a little while back, the type of security that you need to put in place is different when you're protecting the data center or when you're protecting the cloud, right? So we talked about zero trust model, network-centric, signature-based, behavior-based, et cetera. We also need to enable the business to adopt a cloud consumption model, right? So maybe even bypass moving your servers into a cloud center and just kind of migrate out of that and just move straight into consuming a cloud service rather than having software kind of deployed in servers, right? So those are all things that we are thinking about, and that's where the budget is going, really.
Okay,
Yeah, and
thank
I'll
you,
just add. I'll just add that that's similar to us. We were remote ready, right? We embraced the mobile workforce, and so our technology was built for that. So our transition was pretty smooth. One of the challenges that we did face was around our patching, right? We found that we couldn't stage our patches like normal because all those patches would go out at 8 and 9 a.m. when everybody logged on, and it would consume that VPN bandwidth. So we had to make some adjustments there, and that caused us to have more meaningful conversations about, a zero trust model, right? What would it look like if we allowed our workforce to just connect to the cloud's edge, right, in a secure way, so that we no longer had that VPN aggregation point? How do you do that in a secure way, and how do you leverage those zero trust concepts and that granular visibility within zero trust to make sure that you maintain or increase your security posture, right? And being able to dial that up and dial that down in a very granular way where appropriate, right? Less sensitive data, you don't need as much rigor. More sensitive data, you need more rigor. So again, we're having those conversations now as a result of that transition to remote.
Great, thank you. Saeed, how does artificial intelligence or machine learning help these guys in this new environment?
The simple answer is by detecting attacks that we haven't seen before. And how we do this is by training models on what employees are doing these days. In the old days, we trained models to say, someone will go to corporate X at 8 in the morning, they will leave their work at 5 in the morning. If you see communication from their laptop or desktop to a server in Russia at 5 in the morning, this is an abnormal behavior. Now this has all changed. As we know, there has been multiple studies by Microsoft and other companies saying that employees are potentially more productive working from home. They work longer hours and they work from different locations. So if we kept the same models that we had in the old days, if we use these to detect anomalies these days, these models most likely will fail. That's why we need to build more systems and train more models to take all of the new input that we have about the behavior of employees, the behavior of cyber criminals. We now have more variables to work with. We have someone's router at home that is vulnerable, that hasn't been updated for the past 5 years. Someone is working from Starbucks through an unsecured network. Someone is VPNing from let's say Africa or some other country. So all of these new variables have to be taken into place. We need to use all of that knowledge that we have gained in the past, let's say, year or so, 9 months, and then build new systems and train new models to know what anomaly looks like. Anomaly that we knew about maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago isn't the same anomaly that we are working with today. So
Mary Ellen, one of the things that I'm hearing from Alex and Bo and Saeed is that their challenges seem to change every day as the business moves. The challenges change. For small businesses, they're adopting rapidly too. In the incentive program, you talked about what, is this a one and done, or how do we continuously help small businesses to keep up with these rapid changes?
Great question. So one of the things I just kind of want to go back to what we were talking about, the data migrating to the cloud instead of being on-prem. That's the world that small businesses live in. The experience that we have had with working with small business community is that they haven't really thought through where are they storing their data. So they have data in Box and Google Docs and maybe Azure, GitHub. They have maybe a SaaS application where the data is stored. They've never sat down and sort of taken inventory of where is this data being stored. They think if it's in the cloud, somebody else is worrying about the security associated with it. We have to do a lot of work with them to say, no, you're still responsible for the data security. You need to look at what you're currently collecting, building, using in terms of the sensitivity related to the rules associated with that data, and put together a cogent plan going forward on where to appropriately store the data. And of course, when COVID happened, it was even worse because now everybody's working at home and they hadn't really thought through, well, are they storing that data on their laptop at home? Is that laptop a business delivered application or computer, or are they using their own personal devices? What kind of security provisioning is already on that personal device that they're using? Are they using VPN? Many of them really are not using VPN. They didn't really realize that they needed to use that for secure communications. So the whole life cycle of creating data, where they're storing it, had to be really rethought through in terms of a cogent way to protect the data in the future environment we're all working in. Businesses, in terms of the Data Protection Act, they're still back in the world of maybe it won't happen to me, and if it does, I'll deal with it then. Unfortunately, we've got to get them to the place ahead of time to start thinking about, it's not if, but when you're going to get hacked or have a problem with a hacker inside your system stealing data. You've heard so many increases in the number of ransomware attacks. We do a lot with companies to try to get them to understand what it is and how they should deal with it. Would cyber insurance actually protect them against a ransomware attack? Yes, no, maybe not. We've got to get to a place where we can incentivize businesses to start down the cybersecurity path earlier rather than later. And I think that's the challenge we all face, because all of those small businesses connect to a larger supply chain network. They want to get, they want to be compliant with DFARS, 800, 171. They want to get to a place where they can compete on those DoD contracts. They may have already previously had a DoD contract, but going forward, DoD is requiring certain contracts. If you're a small business or any business that's competing on that contract, you need to be DFARS compliant. They set the standards associated with that.
Hey, Dr. Burley, as Saeed was saying about behaviors change and some of the analytical models maybe don't hold up as well anymore. And you're challenged us about behavior and technology changing together. How do we get, understanding of consumer and employee behavior? Because I think employees probably act more like consumers when they're at home.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we have to engage the people who have been studying behavior for a long time. The psychologists and the sociologists understand how to incentivize behavior and behavior change. And so we need to do a better job of integrating the conversations between the behaviorists and the technologists, and recognize that there are lessons that we can port from what behavioral psychologists, behavior sociologists have been doing. We can bring those into our space and think about how to use those lessons to incentivize behavior across the realm. Behavior under stress, behavior under uncertainty, all of those different situations have been studied for a very long time, and there are things that we can learn by incorporating it together.
Thank you. There's a couple questions from the audience that I think we have time to get in here. one of the questions has to do with insider threats. Are there measures that you all are taking or recommend to prevent insider threats?
Yeah, let me quickly tackle that. So the way we are addressing that is through behavior analytics, right? So when you think about an insider threat, it's a user either going to places where they shouldn't be. I mean, they are an authorized, approved user in your environment. It's very hard for them, for us to track them every single move because their move is authorized by the environment or the enterprise, right? So the best way to kind of tackle that is through behavior analytics, right? So Saeed kind of talked about this a little bit. Machine learning, learning what normal behavior looks like, patternize it, and then let it kind of see when it deviates from a pattern, right? That would be the ideal scenario. I mean, that's, you know, that technology has come a long way. There are both network-based detections in that scenario, as well as behavior-based user analytics as well. That would actually help complement each other when it comes to that insider threat technology.
Okay. Bo, you want to add anything to that?
Well, it's a fundamentally different challenge, and it's a very difficult challenge, right? Because cybersecurity primarily involves monitoring IT systems, right? We monitor those systems, we protect those systems and the data. When you're talking insider threat, you've shifted the focus to monitoring people, and that's a little more nuanced. And so, you know, the cybersecurity visibility that Alex talked about is a critical part of that program. But a mature insider threat program, it uses all kinds of inputs from your credit report, your travel history, you name it, right? Anything that would indicate that you were no longer trustworthy as an employee. So it's a hard question, very difficult.
Thank you. One last question here, and Bo, this may have come from your comment about DevSecOps, but someone wanted to know what are a lesson or two you'd like software developers to learn in today's DevSecOps worlds that would simplify your job in cybersecurity?
Yeah, I saw that question, and it reminded me of a quote from the end of October from the NIST Federal Computer Security Managers Forum. Ron Ross put it this way. He said, DevSecOps puts the burden of the ATO back on the developers where it belongs. And so ATO in the federal world is the authorization to operate. That's the formal authorization to sort of go live with an IT system. And so typically that's a very integrated approach to build that system and get it ready for production. But Ron Ross points out that under DevSecOps, that shifts to the developer. So imagine a developer being accountable for all the security requirements. And we talked a little bit earlier, the patching, the configuration, the monitoring, you name it, all the activities that go into managing an IT system, accounting for that in the development lifecycle. It's a fundamental shift from where we are today, from agile software development, right? It's using agile on steroids. So it's a different paradigm.
Okay, I have one last question for all the panelists, and I'd like you to give me as best you can, a one-sentence answer, because I want this to be from the top of your head. We have a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience today, and the whole organization of TIE is for fostering entrepreneurship. So if you were advising on these entrepreneurs, what cybersecurity capability, either people, process, technology, would you suggest that this entrepreneur community develop so that that the government or industry might buy in the next 2 to 5 years? And I'll start with Dr. Burley. We'll go in reverse order.
I would suggest they focus on the integration between the three.
Okay. Saeed.
Excellent. I would focus on the people and then build systems that focus on educating the user, learning behaviors to basically solve problems with insider threats and even external threats. That would be my approach.
Thank you. Mary Ellen.
I would say we need to get to a place where cybersecurity is a business practice that's integrated in everything they do. It's not an added on activity. So we need to get to a place where you think about the process of coming to work, doing your work. How do you integrate process steps, security steps, and everything that they do during the day?
Thank you, Marilyn. Alex.
I would definitely go with something on the tech side. One of the issues that we are tackling now is, how do I give comfort and level of confidence to my users when they're connected to my environment or to the internet, that their data is not open and available to be seen by the public. Not everybody is a security expert. They are not going to look for that little icon in the corner or looking at the stuff. How do I give them that comfort and level of assurance in a turnkey kind of a solution? That's something that I would really like to have.
Thank you, Alex. And finally, Bo.
So I view it more in terms of cyber warfare as opposed to an IT problem, right? Because on both sides of the equation, the attacker and the victim, there's people, right? And so you got to keep those people in mind as you're solving these problems. We talked today a lot about how technology can be brought to bear to solve these problems, but also keep in mind that our adversaries are leveraging technology, AI, machine learning to advance their objectives too. So I think it's about being that expert and innovating according to the theme of this panel, and then helping organizations, simplifying it for organizations so that everybody doesn't have to be an expert. You guys can be that expert for us, and that's very valuable.
Okay, well, thank you, Bo Hauser. Thank you, Alex Atamalo. Thank you, Mary Ellen Seal and Dr. Diana Burley. And thank you, Saeed Abu Nima. Have a great afternoon and a great conference, everyone.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now we'd like to thank our sponsors for today. Bank of America is our gold sponsor.
Keeping your information and data safe is a top priority at Bank of America. We are continuously investing in our technology, processes, and people to combat ever-changing cyber threats. Cyber threats that can impact every region and industry, every business transaction, and digital interaction. That's why we use a holistic 5-fold threat management framework to keep information safe. Every stage is important, but it all starts with preparation and prevention. We're constantly analyzing threats and identifying ways that cyber criminals could strike, so we can take steps to close gaps, strengthen controls, and help stop cyber incidents before they happen. Detection and mitigation are the next layers. We continuously monitor networks, applications, and third parties for potential cyber activity. And we proactively engage and partner with law enforcement and help lead a broad industry coalition to make things safer. Should an incident occur, we would apply our well-rehearsed mitigation plan to ensure it's contained, and then we respond. Through constant preparation, our teams are ready to recover quickly so we and you can resume operations. Our threat management framework is ingrained in all we do and helps to strengthen the solutions that power your business. For example, our Cash Pro platform employs the strongest anti-fraud protection on the market. And we've added new commercial card security layers, including real-time alerts and greater user controls. We appreciate your business and your trust in Bank of America. In addition to keeping your information safe, we welcome the opportunity to talk to you about what you can do to protect your business and your customers.
And thank you to our lunch sponsor, Miracle Systems. Everyone who logs on to TidyC Capital GovCon event today will receive a $10 Grubhub e-card at the conclusion of today via email. Thank you, Miracle Systems.
I'm the president of Miracle Systems LLC, and we are based in Arlington, Virginia. Our company is heavily focused into IT innovation, IT strategy, and IT solutions for federal government. When I talk to my stakeholders, they see that the company is committed and the commitment is from the top, because I settle for nothing but the best. Either I or my management is always there. We are constantly engaging our customer, and we take those suggestions and go back to our customer once we implement a solution for them. You have to constantly perform and excel, and you have to be proactive. Don't start a business unless you want to work 24/7. My vision in terms of getting my staff motivated, myself motivated to achieve that target, drives everyone in the company to achieve that level.
And thank you again to all of our sponsors of today's event.